Well, hey there, and welcome to this edition of BEP Talks. My name is Beth Johnston, the host, coming to you from the BEP Talks studio at the Global Society of Empowered Women. And as you have heard me say before, I am just so blessed to meet such incredibly generous people who join us from different industries and professions, different ages and stages of life and career. The common denominator is how they come together to share their beliefs, experiences, and passions, thus, a BEP talk. And we never have an exception. We're not starting today. Today, my guest is Susanne Bellisario, who is an author, speaker, leadership and well being coach, as well as a senior finance professional who is very passionate about helping professionals and organizations navigate pressure without sacrificing well being. That is a topic that I think people's ears must be ringing now. Balancing pressure without sacrificing well-being. So I'm not going to guess what it is. I'm just going to bring to the BEP Talk stage today's guest, Susanne Bellisario.
Hello, Beth. How are you?
I am so well and more than well and quite delighted to meet you here. We come together here originally on BEP Talks and meet each other and just have a very friendly kind of chat. So I thank you so much joining me from Perth, Australia.
Thank you very much, Beth, for having me on. Thank you.
My absolute pleasure. So, like so many people that I've been blessed to meet and interview here on BEP Talks, you wear many different hats. I said author, speaker, leadership and well-being coach. Um, what is it that you are most passionate about these days?
I'm passionate about people, particularly professionals, having worked amongst, at sort of within the higher level management profession in
Mhm.
in corporate and health and government environment. Uh, and seeing those professionals and experiencing myself the burden of the responsibilities that we carry and witnessing how that is emulated in the way they manage themselves or don't
Mm.
manage themselves that well, and the price that we pay internally as well as the price that is paid externally with the people that they manage,
Yes.
and the ripple effect that it has on people. So basically, I'm passionate about health and wellness, but also the ripple effect that it has around the people, not only just
Yeah.
the risk that they put themselves under if it's not managed well. So, from the psychological, the physical, the mental health and well-being element is really so important. And in these days, we all are very aware that, pressures in society globally are just compounding with so many different elements of
Yes.
what is impacting our lives in
Yes.
society.
Yes.
And I think many of us are finding it harder and harder to sustain that feeling of balance and health and wellness while
Truly.
navigating, our jobs.
Truly.
And I think particularly as leaders, they have another layer of burden that they carry when they're wearing many different hats. Just not, I'm not the only one who wears many different hats. And then, it's if you're not aware of how you're regulating yourself or how things are impacting you, it can quickly spiral into chronic stress,
Mm.
which is not good for yourself or for anyone around
No,
you.
no, no. So I know, and without asking you, to state anything that you don't wish to state, but I know
Mm.
that you know firsthand the toll that chronic stress can take on one's health.
Absolutely. And I'm one of the first people to put up my hand and say chronic stress has definitely impacted me over the years. And I guess, yes, so you've brought me to the point of clearly, I think articulating the fact that that was one of the big reasons why I had written this book was because of my own lived experience as well. Having moved countries, having been a single parent, having had the responsibility of looking after my family as well as
Yes.
being a carer, and then also carrying a leadership position. And particularly as a woman, we're expected to magically carry it all, right? And to
Yes.
be things to all people.
Yes. Great
So,
common denominator among women in leadership. I say we're asked to wear so many hats and we don't necessarily look good in all of them.
no,
Some of
exactly.
them they just don't work. You mentioned the book, which I hadn't mentioned. Let's talk about that. The Professional's Guide to Stress Management. What was the genesis of your writing that book?
Um, the awareness that stress can be better managed and wanting to
Hmm.
share my own view of how we can have a more sustainable, compassionate conversation that is based on realism, evidence, and basically a compassionate way of looking at the management of stress without looking at simple surface level issues, simple quick fixes, um, and basically making it prescriptive. The intention of this book was to bring a holistic framework to the management of stress and also to the understanding of stress to make it more sustainable for people. So, because first of all, we need to understand, well, in my view, my message is that it's helpful if we can understand how we individually react to triggers that we individually find stressful. So there's the internal response and the internal behavior to stress, and our reaction to that. But then there's a second layer, which is the pressures that we experience from the external environment, whether it's our external, immediate environment or whether it's our work environment. So some of those things we cannot control, but we can learn to manage to control our response to those. So one of them is our internal framework that we have in terms of how we respond to triggers. And what I might find stressful, you or somebody else may not find as stressful as I do. So there's that element, and then there's the external locus of control that we think where we cannot control what is pressuring us. So it's learning to manage those two kinds of different scenarios. And what I've done is put it into a framework where um, it's something that you can hopefully continue to remember and to use as a holistic structure to intentionally manage your stress better than just, forgive me, I can't think of another word, but mindlessly going through life and just
Yes.
being reactive to whatever is happening to you.
So what I'm hearing, and certainly would say we've all experienced and certainly used and perhaps overused the word, oh, I'm so stressed, that
Yes,
there are degrees of it. And where people can just say, oh, I'm so stressed. Why? Well, for very minor reasons, all things, being fair and
yes,
equal, versus truly, truly difficult moments that eventually, sadly, we all will have those. So what so stress is it's a very subjective feeling or state of mind.
it's yes, so true, Beth. And look, I was also very guilty years and years ago now, like in my 30s, especially 30s, early 40s, of that was my mantra. I'm so stressed. And and as Elizabeth Epple says, stress doesn't go away. But we need to remember that stress is the thought in our head. And so, yes, we will have things, as you say, those more serious things that are absolutely stresses. But it's also a matter of just taking a step back and increasing our mindfulness and our intention about how we manage things, that our responses, and then and and having a reason behind that. I mean,
Right, right,
surely when
right.
when we put a little bit of an extra layer of wisdom around, well, hang on a minute, what is serving me about saying I'm so stressed all the
Mm,
time? Let's remove the drama. I don't want to
yes,
diminish what stress is, but if we can learn to recognize what is actually not really a stressor, but we are dramatizing it,
yes,
then we've given ourselves a little bit of a gift by with the self-regulation, we are actually regulating, what is going on in our brains, our prefrontal
mhm,
cortex, our hippocampus, our cortisol, our adrenaline, and it's preserving what what is going on internally, and not, adding another layer of
right.
physiological stress, or which is
Oh,
a physical
yes,
physiological stress,
exactly, exactly.
unnecessarily,
Yeah, yeah,
being us calmer and more in control,
right.
which
For
is
the
good for yourself and everybody.
well, yes, and to pass it on, or is kind of a
Yeah.
selfish thing. For the second time today, I'm saying that life, these are not my original words, but it's 10% of what happens and 90% of how you react or respond to it. So,
Yeah.
what some people would feel is stressful, some people would, not be worried at all. I have said many times when people have said to me, and they don't necessarily use the word stress, but it's kind of stating something, a synonym of that state of mind or thinking. And what I have often said is, and I say it not in a snide way, but I would say, you know what? I hope that that's the worst thing that happens to you today.
Mm.
My prayer for you is that that's the worst thing. And I've had some people who kind of go, oh, yeah, thank you. That's not really so bad. Like there was traffic, or
Yes.
there was no milk in the grocery store, and oh, I'm so stressed, I'm so stressed. Tell
Mm.
us, by your definition, is there a
Mm.
more clinical, if that's the right word, definition of stress so that we would recognize those symptoms?
That's a very good question. Well, at the baseline, stress is really a response to fight or flight. So it's a physiological response. So it there are no more tigers in our building woods, if you will.
Okay.
And so really it is a matter of how our mind perceives the moment. I and I cannot give you one clinical definition. I mean, it is a physiological response.
It is.
But
No.
that physiological response occurs in relation to the thought or the feeling that is happening. So if you have, a feeling of anxiety, or a feeling of fear, or a feeling of urgency, and that translates into something that is more escalated in your response,
Mm-hmm.
it will trigger a response in your hippocampus. Well, your prefrontal cortex first, you'll interpret that, and then it'll go to hippocampus. It will deal with the decision making, and then the hormones will flood almost immediately, the cortisol and the adrenaline.
There will be chemical responses to
There
that
will be
feeling.
chemical responses. There will be chemical
So
responses.
something is telling me
So
that we're overusing, and you use the word drama, and I like that people are overusing the word stress. That did it become a way of the more stressed we were, the more important we are to other people, the harder we're working. Did it become a barometer in people's minds to use "I'm so stressed" as what? As a measure of self-importance?
Beth, what I think it is that, particularly in the corporate environment, and people
Mm,
who are ambitious and they're wanting, quite justifiably, to climb the ladder as they go
mhm,
along and develop their careers. I
sure.
think the pressure, the always being on, has become something that is normalized by the employee as well as management, in this fast-paced world.
True.
So in a way, we are using the response, I'm so stressed. We're potentially, many of us, and I've done it myself, I've been guilty, have almost worn it as a badge of honor,
Yes, that's what
you
I was
know,
trying to
where
say. Yes,
that
yes,
is, we're wearing it to say, I am working so hard. I'm to show that we're committed, that we're pushing
yes.
through the exhaustion, that we can do this, that we're always on. We don't mind. We will do whatever it takes to get to the end point. But the problem with that is that if it's chronically maintained, it will lead to burnout. It will. And
Well, yeah.
then, and then, not only do we have the hormonal reactions, you know, that can be on and off if it's if it's if it is sort of on and off, but if we go into a chronic state of always having elevated cortisol and adrenaline, other things get impacted. I mean, literally, our focus is compromised, our reactivity increases, our immunity it decreases. We can be subject to other chronic disease,
Yeah, yeah.
including cardiac
Hmm.
disease and so on, and mental health. So,
Sure.
therefore, what we are doing is compromising our ability to sustain ourselves as we want to remain ambitious. And so, you know, that is why the leaders at we see it progressively even in leadership in politics. People are resigning because they say they can't handle the stress anymore, and within a few years, not decades like they used to be able to do, because the world is so much more fast paced. So
Yeah.
bring it back to leadership positions. At a different level. I think many of us, and I've witnessed this myself, um, you know, you can see them suffering and you can see their reactivity impacting the people that they're managing. So it reduces morale, it increases absenteeism, um, teams are less productive. They, as opposed to people thinking that if they push harder, strive further, that their productivity increases. That is not the
Well,
case.
no, no,
Research
that's not
shows
true.
that.
Yeah.
So there's
So
a
what
sort
I'm
of a
hearing,
whole circle.
Suzanne, am I hearing, forgive me for speaking over you, that it can
No, no,
become
no.
contagious because you can, especially if you're in
Yes,
a leadership position, you can, whether you're trying to or not, impose it onto other people. And you were talking about those triggers. And yet there are people who nothing seems to bother them.
yes.
Like they just, I don't know, they just, nothing bothers them.
They're
So
laid
are there
back.
personality types?
Definitely, definitely. Personality types can influence reactivity to stress. Your A-type personality is really going to be someone who is laid back as opposed to people who are more introverted, and who, although introverts, they may respond to, they may internally develop and process things without actually showing it outwardly.
Mhm.
So it really it depends on your attitude as well. But I mean, A types are definitely those who you know will overtly demonstrate responses to stress if they aren't intentional and more self-aware. So, um, yeah, I really, you've got to. I don't think there's one personality type that handles it better than another. It really just depends how what your thoughts and reactions are overall to, and
If you live with and what they're imposing on you and the influences around you. If you're coming from a stressful environment because everybody else can't deal with stress. Let me ask you
yes.
this. Is it more, who's more widely stressed, men or women?
Ah, that's a very good question, Beth. Research is showing that women are feeling the impact of stress more than men. Men are also stressed. In global researchers, Gallup researchers showed that men and women are both increasingly feeling the impact of stress over, comparing years to years. However, So, for example, the latest Gallup poll says 40% of employees globally have experienced a lot of stress in the last day.
Oh,
However, 36% of women said their stress levels were higher than a year ago. 25% of women said, I'm just reading this at the moment here, 25% of women said they had taken off work in the past year because of mental health challenges. The Gallup poll has also reported recently that women have reported higher engagement than men. However, they've also experienced higher levels of burnout than men.
well, as I said, and you're a great example of it, author, speaker, um, coach, and still having to deal primarily, I'm guessing it's still the same. I know I see it all the time, still having to balance what's going on in the proverbial 9 to 5 and then the 5 to 9. And men just kind of seem to, um, women are more multi-leveled, more multitasking, which doesn't mean it's a better
Yes.
thing or it makes us
No.
better at anything. But would you agree that that adds to the stress? And post COVID, when women here, certainly in the United States, doing the homeschooling and having to walk away from corporate environment, and whether it was just working from home, and I don't mean to minimize just working from home, or starting their own businesses.
Yeah.
And certainly being an entrepreneur is not an exit strategy from stress. I think
No.
I think we would all agree on that.
We've all learned that. Yes,
We will all
indeed.
agree on that. Yes, that's kind of a self-imposed stress,
Yes, indeed.
perhaps. Yeah.
Yes, which is more, it can be use. There is also use stress, which is, a positive stress. So we do need some stress in our environment to keep us motivated and so on. And again, it's how it's what is motivating us and how we respond to it. But I agree, absolutely, it's so true that the expectation on women is I think greater. We impose it on ourselves. We think that we need to be superwoman and we layer the expectation on ourselves that we think we can do it all and just push through. And I think it would behoove us all to
Mm,
put more structure around the way we manage our time and energy as women,
yeah.
learn to let go of a few things more. So this is part of the framework that I talk about in the book. So remove the perfectionism, that we tend to put onto ourselves in terms of being able, like even if an expectation that we can do all things and be all things to all people, maybe let's just reduce our standards just a little bit sometimes, or our expectations of
Right.
what pockets that we can address and manage that more strategically and be more intentional. And I
Yes.
have found that the more that I have done that and the more that I stay in that lane of intention and awareness, sometimes it's hard because you're so used to being,
Yeah.
you know, on the go and always on. But the more you embrace that perspective,
Mhm.
the the bigger gift you give to yourself and to your
Yes.
family and to your
Yes.
teams that you
I
manage.
agree with you. We have to learn to say no when it's strategically better for us to say no. I always
Yes,
say you can't give away that which you do not have. And time is so fleeting and so precious. And if you keep saying yes to people for the sake of saying yes, to be a pleaser, to fawn over people, let's say, and to try to be all things to all people, I think it diminishes how well you do everything because something will be
exactly.
sacrificed.
Yes,
You're
I
moving it
agree.
from from one bucket to another. And
Yes.
or if you're not doing that and it's causing you to be losing sleep at night, that certainly doesn't diminish stress.
No, and that's a symptom of increased stress,
So,
just the one thing. There's many, but that's one,
so
losing
I was
sleep.
going to ask you that. What are the signs that people should know? And I'm going to say particularly women, as my platform is mostly for women,
Yes,
that you should say, "Oh, something's changing." What are some recognizable
yes,
signs that
yes.
stress is building?
Number one is poor sleep, followed by irritability, tension, mental fog, emotional fatigue, feeling as if you're always on. That's, like, again, that's something that we normalize, but if we
Mm,
can be more aware that that is actually not normal,
yeah.
that we need to teach ourselves how to rest more if we're those sort of personalities that are very driven and ambitious.
Yes.
And then, being more reactive, mental fog, being less patient, um, and just finding it harder to concentrate,
Mm.
feeling more fatigue. So it's there are many, many different signs that, and
This is,
again, those are the
this is
sorts of things that
physiological. I mean, those are
psychological,
impacting health.
yes, absolutely impacting health. And I can't emphasize enough because I've been guilty of it myself. We think that these things are normal, when they're actually not. And we have to get used to the idea that let's just pull back a bit. We don't need to feel like that because I think there's the potential for it to be addictive, because we think we're achieving if we're feeling like that.
You refer to it as a medal of honor, and yeah, I get. Years ago, do you remember that people used to? Oh, how many years ago? Many people used to. How shall I say? Revel in how little sleep they got. Oh, I don't sleep. I only got to sleep for 3 hours. I only got to sleep for 4 hours. And they meant that to imply or for you to infer that how important they are, how big a job they have, that so
Exactly.
many people depend on them. And I remember hearing that, and this goes back, but that the less sleep you got, you held yourself at a higher level. And all I
You're
kept thinking is,
validating your.
do you remember that? All I kept thinking is, you
Yes,
must
I
be
do.
doing,
I do
right?
that.
You must be doing something wrong. You
That's
must be
right.
doing something wrong. Now, we all had those nights. I did as a student of, being up, the night
Mm,
before a test or before a paper were due or something such as that, self-imposed. But then you
yes.
would make up for it somehow. But stress is real. It can be debilitating. How can we, if we see signs or symptoms in other people, is there a way for us to lovingly reach out to them and say that we notice it and make suggestions? Is that a proper thing to do?
With a coaching hat on, uh, personally, well, it depends. Like if it's if it's someone close to you and you feel that level of comfort with them, then to approach. Yes, we can approach and say this is what we're noticing, and perhaps ask them how they're feeling and what is going on. As a manager, um, yes, it would. If it's in, if you're particularly if you're noticing that it's impacting their performance and their productivity,
And
and
yeah,
those things are married together, then you sit with your staff and you have a conversation about you know, just asking them what is going on, and you reflect back to them
yes,
lovingly that you're
Bingham.
noticing these things. The thing is, you can reflect back what is going on, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to be able to resolve the
No,
management of
no,
stress.
no.
It's
And you certainly
really
don't
a
want
matter
to
of
add stress. Right. You certainly don't want to add
it's a matter of
stress.
raising their
Mm,
awareness, right?
right,
And then
right.
if we have, if there's the high level executive or the high level professional, such as a a doctor. I've worked with many doctors over time, or CEOs, and they're just always on. I mean, it's unlikely that we have permission to go to them and say, look, I noticed this is what you're doing. So with
Yeah,
that sort of person, unfortunately, if they're not searching for resources, if they're not recognizing in themselves, it's very
yeah,
hard to just go up and say something. So
yeah,
really, I think ultimately the best remedy for managing stress, I would like to help reframe the way that we define stress and the way that we respond to it, and to deepen the understanding of how stress impacts us, what kind of different stresses there are, and what we have more control of within ourselves and our own internal regulation, as well as our perception of how we can respond to external pressures. And external pressures are very, very real. So then there's another layer, so first of all, externally, there can be just triggers, right? But then there's also things that we actually have to respond to that can be very pressured and will stress us. But then there's this third element of where we can better learn how to respond to those things in a more sustainable way that isn't going to break us and lead us to burnout. So there's all these different layers of of our perception and reaction to stress. And if we can unpack that and raise the awareness of these things, then I think it is one little step closer in my humble way, in my humble attempt to, improve our own health, improve our well-being, improve the ability to sustain what we are doing in the work environment so that we can remain ambitious and then we can go towards, achieving those career goals without burnout. Look at Jacinda Ardern, who was, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. There was another Premier in Australia, in Victoria, who also prematurely resigned because of burnout. Both of them, that's in years gone by, I mean, I know I'm talking about leaders, but perhaps some of the listeners might be able to, they might know those people, identify with them in terms of, well, not being premiers and prime ministers, but just in terms of what is going on for them and saying, oh, yes, perhaps I am going at 100 miles an hour and maybe this isn't serving me long term. If I want to sustain what I'm doing long term in my career and in the way, for my health and the way I'm looking after my family or what I want to do outside of my career ambitions, then perhaps I need to manage this differently.
Yeah. I'm working with a client now who is a nurse, an elder nurse, retired, but is working with other nurses 55 years and over who deal with what a nurse does. I mean, they are just, doing God's work here on earth, but physiologically and emotionally, after decades of being on their feet and responding to critical moments in warp speed, that it does begin to take a toll. And
Yes,
they so want to stay in their job, but they become aware of, is anybody else noticing this? And
yes,
that builds stress, which then automatically cycles and takes away from performance. So it kind of becomes like a vicious cycle. Um,
absolutely.
and so important. So I always think of nurses and the role that they play, particularly here in the United States, the caretakers that they are, and the price that they pay
Yeah,
physically, mentally, emotionally for the job that they
yeah.
do. So kudos, I can't appreciate nurses enough. You were talking, Susanne, about the framework and everything, and is all of that in the Professional's Guide to Stress Management book?
It is,
It is.
Beth. Yes.
Okay. So
The
let's make
first,
sure we tell people where they can get that book. Where can
yes.
they get that book?
There is a link to the book on my website, and they can also go direct to Amazon and find it there as well.
We'll go
So,
to Amazon, the easiest thing. And would you tell us your website, please?
yes, thank you. It's SusanneBellisario.com.
Just her name,
Uh, just my,
Susanne
yes,
Bellesario. Very phonetic, SusanneBellisario.com. I can't thank you enough. Um, for the work that you've done and the wealth of information that you obviously possess and have shared with us in a relatively very short period of time. Now, I know that you have done some coaching. You don't do that on a full-time basis. I am aware of that. But if somebody were interested in reaching out to you from the coaching perspective, Susanne. Is there a way for them to do that?
Yes, there is. Thank you for asking, Beth. They can do that through my website. They can go in and directly just reach out. There's a little button there that you push. There's also resources
Sorry,
on my
but
website
right.
just for free that they can certainly download if they wish. And then also Suzanne at SuzanneBellisario.com. Just email me directly either way.
Beautiful,
Would love to
beautiful.
hear from anyone who would be interested in improving their journey on stress
Sure,
management
sure.
and for
So
their
I
own
think
health.
the least stressful thing that everybody can do right now is go to Amazon and order the Professionals with an S guide to stress management. And all of that framework that Susanne was talking about of I don't want to say symptoms, but signs to notice, how to manage it, the what comes from the outside, what's on the inside of you, how you react to other people and their stresses. All of that framework is yours, stress free. Just go to Amazon.com and buy that book. Susanne, I thank you so much for taking the time and for sharing your expertise on a very, very important topic that touches so many people. And all you have to do is turn on the news. I'm sure it's the same where you are. And if you're having a very calm day, within a few minutes, something will hit you and your stress levels can go up. So be aware of that and how you react to it and
Thank
be better
you.
prepared to deal with it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Suzanne,
Thank
I
you for
thank
your
you once
insight.
again. You are such a wonderful guest, and I know I could, as I said, speak with you on and on about this, but I'm going to go get that book, The Professional's Guide to Stress Management.
Beautiful.
And
Thank
to
you.
all of our listeners, our viewers, listening to this BEP Talks, you have just received a wealth of information that I invite you to follow up on. And we invite you to come to BEP Talks and share your beliefs, experiences, and passions, as you've heard Susanne Bellisario here on this episode of BEP Talks. Just go to beptalks.com, find out how you can become a guest on BEP Talks. You have a story, it's worth hearing, it's worth sharing. And this is the wonderful platform to make you easy to remember, impossible to forget. So, as we always say in signing off, may the best always be yet to come. That is my wish for everybody. Until we talk again, bye for now.